Sir, we've got the report, WOO, a very bullish rising demand all the way through to 2035. Can you square that away, Secretary General, with the calls to keep oil in the ground?
This is one of the contradictions of our time. We have seen a report earlier this year from a reputable sister organization that called for a new path to net zero 2050. And to achieve that, in their opinion, the scenario was to reclassify our proven reserves. Globally, 80% is accounted for by OPEC, as you know. And we're talking of about nearly 1.7 trillion proven reserves around the world, and 80% in OPEC member countries, that we should reclassify them as stranded assets and crowd them out of any further investments. And at the same time, we are reminded regularly by this sister organization about energy poverty and the need to ensure investments in an adequate and predictable manner. They have told us time without number that there are over 800 million people in this world today who have no access to electricity. And we share this perspective with them. 600 million out of the 800 are in sub-Saharan Africa. And this same reputable sister organization also reminds us that there are nearly 2.6 or 2.7 billion people who have no access to clean cooking fuels, and 900 million of these are from my own part of the world in sub-Saharan Africa. So we are taken aback by this submission, but we want to take it as an academic scenario because it is not realistic. It's not based on science or in facts. The conversation on climate and energy poverty has to be comprehensive, has to be inclusive. We cannot pick and choose. We cannot select. The Paris Agreement is a global consensus.
So, Secretary General, if you're taken aback by that question raised by the IEA, let's also cast our mind forward. You're going to COP26, and my question to you as the head of OPEC is, what are you hoping to achieve there? What is the scale of agreement on limiting oil and gas? Do you think you will get some kind of limitation agreed at COP26, Secretary General?
Well, here we are born optimists. Despite the hiccup after Paris, we are glad that the world is gravitating back towards the implementation of the Paris Agreement because there is no viable alternative. This is the only global consensus that we have on the table, and its implementation has suffered this hiccup, if you like, but we are hopeful and cautiously optimistic, if you like, that COP26 will bring the world back to the right path of the convention and on Paris, and the divisions that we have seen since the withdrawal of the US and now the return of Joe Biden's government will reunify the world, and the US must take the leadership role that it had played in Paris. I must use this medium to remind viewers that without the leadership role of the US in Paris, it would have been impossible to reach this consensus.
can we also begin to talk about, you were here in Dubai last week at GasTech, and what I want to sense from you is whether you believe, and there's a consensus at OPEC, that we have passed peak fear and peak angst about COVID.
Yes, I remember this was a very hot discussion, if you like, in GasTech in Dubai, and for good reason, because it was very well attended. It was probably the first international energy gathering in person that we in OPEC attended since 2020. And we were very pleased to see the UAE taking this bold and very brave step to host this physical meeting. And the turnout was excellent. And within that context, I shared with delegates that this is a very positive signal that showed that the worst is over for this pandemic, that we have passed the peak, if you like, in your own words, and that the recovery will continue. It may be slow, it may be bumpy, but we are on the path of this positive trajectory.
So can I ask you then, the WOO that you've released today says that we won't need as much oil from OPEC as we did in 2019 until 2026. So is it correct to assume that between now and 2026, you're still going to have restraint and cuts?
The World Oil Outlook 2021, which we just unveiled today, is the first outlook released by any reputable institution. We have taken the first step, and we are positive in this outlook in terms of demand. Demand will continue to grow till 2045. This world is and will remain very thirsty for the consumption of energy. We are projecting 28% growth in energy between now to 2045, and on good reason. Manus, the world population is going to grow by about 20%. Nearly 1.7 billion people will come into this world. And we have also projected to you that the global economy will more than double between now and 2045. And we believe that going into COP26, that energy poverty will be brought back on the front burner together with climate. And therefore, the world will double its efforts in achieving the SDG 7, which the United Nations has resolved several years ago. So demand will remain robust. Consumption will be met by our countries. Our countries are investing, despite the COVID encumbrances, to meet current and future demand. And we hope that the rest of the international industry will also continue to invest in this industry, because the requirement of nearly 11.8 trillion US dollars between now and 2045 as investment capital in the upstream, midstream, and downstream cannot be borne just by national oil companies. It has to be borne by the industry as a whole. And this is at the core of the energy transition. Investments are required badly. We already lost 30% in 2020, on top of the 27% contraction that we have seen in both 2015 and 2016.
So that's the challenge ahead, to get investment back into the market. The near-term issue, the oil market, Secretary General, is on fire. I don't need to tell you that inventories are drawing down. You're going into an OPEC meeting. What will OPEC Plus do next week as we go into OPEC?
We have been very, very consistent on our determination, commitment, if you like, that is enshrined in the framework of the Declaration of Cooperation, that together with our partners in the non-OPEC, we are in this partnership for the foreseeable future. If you like, similar to a Catholic marriage, because the world needs and will continue to need the partners in the Declaration of Cooperation to continue working together like we have done since 2017 to date, navigating ourselves out of the previous cycle. And since 2020, as a result of COVID, you have seen how we rose to the challenge together with our partners, took historic decisions and implemented them creditably well to date. And this we will continue going forward, because the process of bringing the market to balance, as you know very well, is a continuous process. The uncertainties are beyond oil. There are factors on the macroeconomy, on geopolitics, that are totally beyond the control of OPEC and our partners.
Secretary General, the likes of Vitol are saying today that OPEC Plus may need to increase production beyond the 400,000 barrels agreed. Do you see that as a real discussion next week, an increase in production?
We welcome all these constructive discussions from within the industry. We have been as transparent as a fishbowl. We engage our partners both from the producing side as well as from the consuming side. We have been ahead of the curve, if you like, by deciding to begin to release additional volumes, barrels of 400,000 every month from now to next year. And this we did after very careful analysis of the supply-demand profile and the landscape coming out of the COVID pandemic. And we decided consciously that we will be meeting every month. And this we have done since, I think, April of 2020. We have had about 9, I think, ministerial meetings in 2020. This year so far, I think we have had about 8 or so. We are going into the 9th one next week. So the world should be rest assured that this group of countries, OPEC plus our non-OPEC partners, will continue to do what it knows best, how to keep the market in balance, how to navigate through the turmoil such as the ones that we have seen recently.
The gas markets, natural gas in the US and the UK and Asia is roaring higher. What scale of crisis? How would you describe the gas market? Are we in crisis?
Well, I know the volatility that we are currently witnessing is on the high side. And this volatility is largely being driven by factors outside the control of OPEC, as well as the OPEC and non-OPEC in the Declaration of Cooperation, and hence the need for this global dialogue to be all-inclusive, particularly with regards to the energy transition. The volatility that you are seeing in gas is also visible in the oil market, and we are.
Do you think that the gas crisis, as people are calling it, is going to boost oil demand? I'm seeing numbers like 500,000 barrels per day next quarter. Do you agree with that assessment?
We, in our projections in the short term, continue to see demand growing progressively. as countries open up from the COVID restrictions and encumbrances, as travels open, as more planes fly, as the restrictions between countries are eased, there is no doubt that the large contraction that we saw in demand last year will not likely to materialize. We are on an upswing of the demand recovery. And the concern now is how together both producers and consumers going into this transition will come back to the fundamentals, to the basics. That no single...
Secretary General, that the gas situation, I just want to finish off with this. Do you think, how do we alleviate, what can alleviate the gas spike? Do you think that Nord Stream 2 coming online will help?
It is generally a function of supply. And you cannot even attribute that to one single supply source. I know in one of the countries in Europe, the narrative is a shortage of truck drivers, not on the molecules. So it depends on from country to country, but we can say it's a major supply constraint in the face of rising demand.
Well, let's just finish off with that, Secretary General. Oil is above $80. The last time the US showed concern, the White House was calling OPEC to speed the return of barrels. Prices are higher now than then. Are you receiving calls? Do you think the US will call and put a little bit of pressure on to add more than the 400,000 that you've agreed at the moment? Pressure to come?
We have always been realistic. We try to be ahead of the curve, and hence the decision to pause on the supply adjustments and to reverse the adjustment to begin to put back 400,000 barrels a day every month. And we are continuing to do that. And every month we're going to meet and we're going to look at the hard data, not only in one region, but globally, so that we can take informed decisions that will meet the expectations of consumers.
Are you prepared to do whatever it takes to keep control of this market, Secretary General?
We are not in the business of controlling the market. What we do is to work with our partners in the non-OPEC to consult our consumers and take an all-inclusive decision with regards to our supply to the market to restore stability to the market. And once we are able to achieve that, we go to the next step of trying to sustain that stability. And hence my earlier remarks that this is a continuous process. And hence the world needs this partnership between OPEC and non-OPEC for the foreseeable future.